everyone, welcome. If this is your first lockdown oboe solo concert or you've attended the previous 5, I'm really happy to have you with me here tonight. If you're listening from my own Facebook page at Catherine Needleman Oboist, or my YouTube channel, or the Baltimore Symphony Musicians page, or the home of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, it's my privilege to play for you tonight. I'm in the process of playing 11 solo oboe concerts. This is number 6. I'm learning a lot of technology. It's a little stressful to me, but I've learned a lot. I have to thank my friends Josh Kramer and Brian Santero for some more help this week. I am playing with a green screen, so you can let me know how the sound is speaking, how it is playing, and also the visuals. I'm hoping to make improvements. I got rid of my dead dog's chair, which I could never actually get rid of, but for tonight it's gone. And I'm going to use the opportunity to play in some of my favorite spaces in Baltimore with the green screen. So my quarantine project is addressing a number of solo oboe pieces I've never really had the opportunity to study before. And for me, studying includes performing, and this is impossible in the traditional sense of the word right now, but I'm really enjoying doing this anyway. I'm making my way through all 12 of the Telemann fantasies, as well as a bunch of music that is quite a bit newer. Tonight I also want to address the relationship between the composer and the performer a little bit. So the first piece I'm going to play is by Georg Philipp Telemann. This is his 7th fantasy in D major. He wrote this set of 12, and it's almost like he's beginning again with number 7, which is the second set of 6. He begins with a big, glorious French overture. And in Baroque times, performers were expected to be fluent in improvisation and ornamentation. These pieces were probably played by amateurs in living rooms, very much like mine and yours, to help with their study. In keeping with the French overture here, it's a very over-dotted, sort of dotted rhythm. You'll hear it. It starts right away that way. I'm kind of going with a sort of my attempt at a French interpretation. And I've decided in the last movement to try to emulate a French bagpipe that came from just a little bit before that time. And I think Telemann would have been familiar with the musette, and I think this music suits it well. I don't know that I've ever heard it performed in this way before. I don't know if it's in good taste, and in fact it might be in bad taste, but it's what I feel right now, and so I think it's what I'm going to do. And to that end, I wanted to say that I'll talk about some living composers tonight, and I've been in touch with a lot of them about their music, and one sort of common theme that keeps coming back is that they want the performer to make the work their own. A lot of times we spend a lot of effort perfecting tiny little details, but ultimately a lot of composers that you talk to say they want you to bring something of yourself to it, find a new way to do it. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do with the Telemann tonight, sort of in that light. It's impossible to be in touch with Telemann and ask him how he wanted these pieces to go, so I can only sort of make an educated guess about what his opinion would have been based upon the composers that I'm working with now. And since I can't play in public, I wanted to share the concert from some of my favorite venues. Unfortunately, I don't have the Joseph Meyerhoff Symphony Hall, which is my all-time favorite, but I'm going to start playing this Telemann fantasy in the Music Center at Strathmore, at the hall there. Oops. So the next two pieces I'm going to play for you are by the Scottish composer Thea Musgrave. I sent her an email 2 days ago letting her know about this concert and was floored to get a response from her. And I actually had the opportunity to play these pieces for her in advance and talk to her a little bit about the music and how she perceives the relationship between composers and performers. So she wrote these two pieces as well as a number of other solo works for the oboe, or works where the oboe is a solo instrument, not within an orchestra, for the amazing British oboist Nicholas Daniel. And she really has quite a relationship with him, and I have to thank him for introducing me to these pieces. I'm going to play a little video.
But there's one thing I thought I would tell you which might be useful, and this is what it is. When I was teaching, because I taught for quite a long time in New York, and the one really important thing I said to my students always was, make friends with wonderful performers, and then pick their brains mercilessly, because you may play one or two instruments, but you won't play them like a performer who plays them every day and practices for several hours and so on. There's no way a composer can do that. And there's no way a composer can know all the instruments in the orchestra the way a performer does. There's just no way. You try to learn. But so make friends with performers and pick their brains, and then hopefully you can write things for them and explore new avenues and new ways of doing things that the performer will tell you are possible, and so on. So that, to me, is the very important thing that I thought young composers should hear. And I did that myself because I forget exactly when it was I first met Nick Daniel, but I well remember the first time he was in touch with me to write an oboe concerto for him, commissioned by Maxwell Davis for the Orkney Festival, which is where Max used to live. And so that's what I did. And while I was writing it, I had some crazy ideas and put them through Nick. One criticism I have of Nick was that I used to say, tell me if something is awkward, and because sometimes I can change it. It doesn't need to be awkward. And he never did. He never told me. But otherwise, he was a fabulous, fabulous colleague and, of course, a fabulous, fabulous performer. And that's one of the first works that was the first work that I wrote for Nick. And then I wrote Two's Company, which was written for Nick and Evelyn Glennie, also an incredible performer who's deaf, as you perhaps know.
Right, yeah.
And despite that, she plays the percussion just out of this world. So, and then I've written short pieces, like I heard you play so beautifully. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for writing it.
And
thanks to Nick for making it happen.
Right. So that's what I thought I would tell you, and it hopefully would be interesting for your people who listen, that composers need performers. But I think performers also need composers.
Absolutely, we sure do.
So there you have it.
So here are the two pieces, Dawn and Whirlwind, written in 2012 and 2018. These two pieces were written for important birthdays. Dawn was written for Nicholas Daniel's 50th birthday, and Whirlwind was written just 2 years ago for Thea Musgrave's 90th birthday, and Nicholas Daniel premiered it at her birthday celebration. These are actually the only pieces on this program that I've performed before. I just started playing them last summer when Nick Daniel gave them to me, actually. And I performed them at a celebration for my aunt by marriage, our great-great-great Aunt Lillian. She turned 100 in January, and I got to go play these pieces at her birthday celebration, and I will always associate them with that sort of celebration. Unfortunately, Lillian just passed away a few hours ago, so I want to dedicate this performance to a celebration of her life tonight, and we miss you very much. kind of in the way here. I had Viet Cuong's 6 Canadian scenes in my hands for years, but sadly never got around to playing them until this week. And we crossed paths at Peabody a number of years ago, and we both went to the Curtis Institute of Music also. So I should have played them before because they're fantastic. I was immediately taken by them this week, by their beauty and color of the line, and I had the opportunity to speak with Viet yesterday about his piece, and I had kind of a surprising realization that fits in with the other concerts I've done. And these, let me see if I can get out of the way, it's probably better. In these 6 Canadian scenes that he wrote, he actually used paintings, very much like the Alyssa Morris work and the Gilles Silvestrini work that I've shared with you earlier. And I had no idea. I was practicing them and loving these pieces, this piece, and I had no idea that they were related to paintings at all. And then I was speaking with him, and he's like, well, actually, there were 7, they're called the Group of 7 Canadian landscape painters, and he was inspired by their paintings, and he went to make a set of 7, but he somehow ended up stopping at 6, and he thought it seemed complete at 6. And I said, well, I don't have to mention that, it's just good for me to know. You know, the piece stands so well on its own, and you didn't put it in the score, so I don't have to talk about it. And he said, no, he'd like to talk about it, so I'm going to share with you Viet Cuong talking about the paintings that inspired each of these 6 movements.
So each movement of 6 Canadian scenes captures the subject matter, color choice, texture, and overall mood of a painting by a celebrated Canadian landscape painter of the early 1900s. Like in the first one, I think the texture of it is so like smooth, and I think of like these mountains, those fifths to me, just like kind of the open fifths and the movement, da 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 da. It just like has this like expansive feeling to it that kind of emulates height, I guess, especially with the range of the oboe, like how it goes between the different ranges like that. It kind of has a feeling of vastness, I hope, that is captured in it.
Absolutely.
And the second movement with the trees, and they're kind of spiky looking, the tops of them.
Absolutely.
And so the articulation, all the staccatos and the fast tempo, I think captures like the brittle look to the painting and the trees. And it still has the mountains, so it has like the 5th motive.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh,
and then in the third movement, The Guardian of the Gorge, I kind of wanted it to sound like a grumpy old man, like almost like the Peter and the Wolf bassoon melody, you know?
Oh,
like
okay.
kind of like a little bit like that.
I was trying to go for something a little more beautiful, but okay, I can.
Yeah, well, I think it
grumpy.
does have after the da 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 da, like the trills and stuff, da 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 da, like that's like it harkens back to the smoothness of the mountains.
Okay.
And then that one also introduces water. And then, so in the 4th movement, Mirror Lake, it's like all very smooth and fluid. Very literal word choice today, but like how all the notes are connected, and it's almost sounds, I want it to sound almost like improvisatory. And then the 5th movement, it's like windy. Everything else here is like kind of peaceful, and there doesn't seem like there's a lot of movement in the scenes. Like if you were to look at the first 4, it looks like it's just a very tranquil, serene sort of scene. But then in the 5th movement, like there's wind happening. So I wanted to capture like kind of a chaotic quality.
Sure.
And then in the last movement, it's kind of like the smoothness of the Mirror Lake movement, except without water.
Right.
And here it's really, the mountain is like the kind of the highest looking one of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it goes the highest note in the high F sharp.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really neat how they all have an element that travels through, and I'm glad you pointed that out to me, because I would have missed it otherwise.
And I think, and it's not something I like necessarily like want everyone to like hear like, oh yeah, that's what that was, and like it's just like these things that kind of, when you're writing music, kind of help you create a cohesive piece, even though there's 6 different movements that are all contrasting, to keep it all, or to make it all feel like it's cut from the same cloth, basically.
Yeah, great. Oh, thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Like it's just like.
Okay, so here are the movements, and I just wanted to say, sorry, a little awkward with the positioning here. That the next place that I'm going to play with my green screen is the stage of Andi Musik in Baltimore, which is another one of my favorite places to play. I've been hosting a series there, coffee, patisserie, and classical music, and unfortunately we had to cancel a concert last week, but we're going to be able to do a live stream with social distancing next Saturday morning, so I hope you all can join us there. Looking forward to playing with another person. That should be pretty exciting. Playing with the pianist Michael Shepard. So I'm going to play this piece now on the stage of Andi Musik in Baltimore. So the final piece this evening is by Geoffrey Agrell, and this piece was written in 1993, so relatively old, for the great Australian oboist Diana Dougherty. And Agrell describes her as one of the most remarkable handful of performers he's ever encountered in his entire life, and that's probably true. She's really fantastic. So he set out to write a piece on the border of playability because he knew that Diana could do it. And he wanted to write something that performers would enjoy practicing and audiences would enjoy listening to, and I think he's really succeeded there. And this is actually quite a relatively popular new work for solo oboe. And I have a little quote from him from some of his correspondence about this work. He says, "I always look to see which way everyone else is zigging or has zigged, and then I zag. I look for holes in the literature. If it is clear that the wheel has already been invented, I try to come up with something I try to come up with something completely new, which often means simply placing something older in a brand new context, cross-pollinating, so to speak. I have some background in jazz, guitar, as well as classical, horn. How many works for jazz oboe are there published for classically trained players? I saw right away that the oboe world was well stocked with quote-unquote classical pieces, but was innocent of blues works." Agrell also spends a lot of time in his correspondence talking about how difficult this piece is, which I want to try not to focus on at this very moment. It's definitely not the sort of piece that one should practice for a week and perform in any setting, but I hope to convey the spirit of the work despite what I'm sure will be many imperfections. So thank you so much for listening tonight. It's been my pleasure to get to play music for you tonight. If you want any more details on the music that you've heard tonight, you can see programs and watch interviews with Thea Musgrave and Viet Cuong on my Facebook page in the videos area. For me, it's always wonderful to hear about the music from the composers themselves. You can like or follow my Facebook page at Catherine Needleman Oboist to get more details on upcoming concerts, which will be Fridays from 7:30 Baltimore time for the foreseeable future. Next week, I'm going to play the Telemann E minor Fantasy. That's number 8. I'm just doing those numerically. And this morning, I decided that I wanted to play the C.P.E. Bach Solo Sonata. I hadn't even planned. I have a list of things that I want to do for these 11 concerts, and I hadn't planned on that one, but I felt today the need to go back to something that I've studied for decades. So I'm going to put that, and in between, I'm going to sandwich a piece called X by the young American composer Sarah Bouchara, and that will be a world premiere. So I hope you can join me for that, and thanks again for coming tonight, and I wish everyone good health and good night.